Hello. It's been a while. It's been a cold and rainy winter, but not too bad today. It's 39 degrees out still, so it's still freezing in Oregon, of course. But today we're at Lewis Pioneer Cemetery, and this is a second visit for us for this cemetery. I think I went here about, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, so it's been a while. It's located in Farmington, Oregon, Washington County. There's only one alternative name to the cemetery, and that's Farmington. So let's go meet some of the local residents and hear their story. So this was my second video release on this channel, and I feel as if my 1998 VHS presentation skills have gotten slightly better in 3 years. It's a close race there. And we're up to 500 subscribers, so hey, thanks for watching and subscribing. I really appreciate it for such a little channel, and like I said before, I think I'm boring, so it's nice, cool that you watch. Thanks. Anywho, this cemetery is one of the older ones we've seen in Oregon, starting in 1847. Hard to believe, but there's like apparently 340 memorials listed on Find a Grave for this small cemetery. One new bit of information I learned about the cemetery is that 72 markers were vandalized in 1993. A lot of reviews of this cemetery on Google and other sites kind of rip on the state of it and landscaping, but I thought it looks kind of nice. However, last time I visited here in 2022, I ran into a cool dude named Ken, who was the caretaker for the cemetery. He really fixed it up. He did mention, I believe, that he was like, yeah, it was kind of rough, and I came in and cleaned it up as best I could, and I think he did a great job. He told a story, though, about how this cemetery in this area came about. Something about a few people crashed a boat along the shores of Oregon and came to this area by foot, taking like random paths. I guess a few people died along the trail, but just eventually ended up here. Anyone out here knows that story, please share below, because I honestly couldn't find anything on that. Wow, look at that blue sky. I haven't seen it in months. This cemetery is located on the Charles Lewis donation land claim, hence the name of the cemetery. He appears to be the Charles buried at this cemetery. Looks like he died at the age of 34 in 1855, which is obviously unfortunate. He's also an 1845 arrival, so he didn't get to enjoy Oregon that long. Also showed an alternative death of 1857, so couldn't find an exact cause of death. One random note online mentions this cemetery used to be 3 individual cemeteries, but to keep things simple, they combined it into one. As far as the town of Farmington, it's actually one of the earliest settlements in Oregon, known for shipping grain via the steamships. Rumor has it that the town was named after Farmington, Connecticut, but that wasn't always the case, I guess. Philip and Sarah Harris, who arrived in 1845, founded the Christ Church of Bridgeport. That apparently was the local name for this area, but it was changed because of conflict with another town that was named Bridgeport. That was a common issue back then from my readings. Philip Harris also started up a ferry service across the Tualatin River and built a bridge across it eventually. I guess there's like a plaque on the bridge, but observation of the memorial includes like risking your life and leaning over the edge. It's just in a weird spot. The Tualatin Native American tribes name for the river translates to lazy or sluggish, and I've kayaked down that river. It is kind of really gross and brown, no offense. If you're into old abandoned buildings, the Farmington View School, built in 1912, is still standing until this day. It appears you can take pictures from the road, but unsure if you can like physically enter it. Doesn't look like the code. Enough history and on to the residents. Today, quite a bit new information for our second trip. I was kind of a nib back then, but I got a little better at research, I feel. We'll hear the story of a man who was 91 and still could woo the ladies, meet one of the earliest reverends in this area, meet an individual with a famous last name some of you locals will instantly recognize, hear the story of the famous 5th Illinois from the Civil War that battled camp alcoholism and poor leadership. Must have been a fun time. I finally learned the long-lost Civil War legend of one of the cemetery residents here who met his end at the age of 21. Our first stop is that of David Carns, who has no marker from my understanding. A guy we completely missed out on our last visit, who was born in Washington County, Pennsylvania in 1783. He lived there until he's 40 years old and appears to have relocated to Indiana, where he married Mary Polly Gilliam in 1817. She would die in 1875. However, David wasn't finished getting frisky. At the age of 91, he married Susan Carns, who was around 54 years old at the time. Dude must have been a chick magnet, I guess. In her defense, her first 2 husbands died, one along the Oregon Trail. He's somewhere out there buried along the trail. I couldn't find much on him. Susan, though, would die in 1884, and David would go on for another 5 more years until meeting his maker at the age of 106. I did find a newspaper clipping that said 103, but let the legend live. An article from 1854 in the newspaper stated he was the oldest man in Oregon at the time. In addition, he served in the War of 1812 in my home state of Ohio. Unsure what his involvement was or if he saw action, but Ohio during the War of 1812 were mainly known for the Battle of Brownstown and the Battle of Oak Woods. If David saw action, he's lucky to be alive, because the Brownstown battle was a bit of a disaster based on my read. The U.S. outnumbered the famous Tecumseh's Confederacy 200 to 25. Of those 200 soldiers, 18 were killed, 12 wounded, and 70 just went missing. Back to David, he lived out his days in Oregon, and his neighbors knew him as pretty active, even in his old age. Said to be splitting rails apparently up to 3,000 one winter. The last entry, a year before his death, stated he was estimated to be splitting 5,000 rails that winter. Not sure what his workout regimen was, but worked for over 100 years. An individual we covered in the first video is that of Nathaniel Carpenter Richardson. I didn't do the guy enough credit, but second chance here. He hails from Venice, Illinois. Now, there's a mention in the local history of George W. Richardson, who was the first minister in the Farmington area. Nathaniel was his uncle, and it is said that he helped George get established in this area. Nathaniel was a pretty prominent guy in the area. An 1847 arrival into Oregon. A very big list of Richardsons traveled the Oregon Trail in 1847, in fact. Unfortunately, one of the Richardson's family members was captured by the Comanche tribe, and I guess he tries to escape and they kill him, unfortunately. Nathaniel was a member of the IOFF Montezuma Lodge. In 1894, however, that lodge burned down. Today there's a Tuolumne Masonic Lodge, and their website is like extremely buggy to visit, so I'm not even sure if it's still active. A posting in 2003 describes that some of the old-timers actually still meet up at a picnic at the church site, but however it's kind of now a garden plot. As mentioned, this is one of the early pioneer preachers here in Farmington, and that would be James Abraham Campbell. I believe he got an early start to his career, around like 18 years of age. But thought I'd stop by a cemetery. Interesting piece of history to this area. His parents, John and Nancy, are buried here, but from what I read, the tombstone base is the only remaining part, like the entire headstones are missing. His mother, Nancy's maiden name is Concrete, which goes back to the Revolutionary War times. And there is indeed a Concrete cemetery located in Kentucky. However, there's only one known picture of the cemetery, from my understanding, from like 1918, documented. Hopefully I can show it in the video. All right, the biggest memorial in this cemetery belongs to Thomas Walter Whitcomb Sr. Thomas comes from Devon, England. Online pictures look pretty. The family came to America in 1871, and Thomas and his family would settle in Hillsborough and start their own farm. We're more interested in one of his sons, however, James. He would start up his own farm and was highly successful, to the point in 1889 he was appointed state veterinarian. Was then recruited by Oregon State University to like teach farmers, because I guess he was so good at it. He then goes on to serve Oregon State Governor from 1915 to 1918. However, dies 2 months into his second term. And up ahead is Charles Giles Merrill. Nothing too notable was found, but he was born in Scotland in 1799. Unsure when he came over, but apparently his father was a Revolutionary War soldier, Caleb Barker Merrill. He served in the Massachusetts group and was led by the famous military officers Thomas Hunt and Henry Jackson. Alright, another Civil War soldier can be found at this cemetery, and that's Andrew Morgan Brown. One of the less glorified cavalry groups was that of the 5th Illinois. From my reading, cavalry groups didn't get a whole lot of attention throughout history when it came to the Civil War for some reason. However, this regiment in particular was busy throughout the Civil War fighting the Confederate guerrilla groups, and if you've watched this channel, those guys were the worst of the worst. What was interesting about the 5th was they were very different politically speaking, 60% being Republicans and 40% being Democrats. Not only politically, they differed religiously, culturally, and just their personal beliefs were on the opposite sides of the spectrum there. To add, their regiment suffered tremendously from a lack of direction, battled alcoholism, and yellow fever in camps, along with a severe divide among soldiers, clearly. Leadership was awful, as well as leading to a plethora of problems. The officers also came from different backgrounds, and I'm guessing this led to disagreements and distancing themselves from each other. There is a cool book I found that details the diaries of the soldiers, showing just how chaotic the environment was during the Civil War. One of the stranger stories in this cemetery that has like no success and validation is that of Michal Jacob Chode. I think that's how you say it. Find a grave profile shows he died at the age of 21 and was a Union soldier during the Civil War. The date listed is April 1st, 1864. The legend goes that he falls off a mountain and dies when going AWOL. This apparently took place in Bourbon County, Kentucky. Now, I've looked and looked. I have not been successful in finding his name in the records. I did find that the 33rd Regiment of Kentucky Infantry consolidated into the 26th Infantry, the exact date Mahal was said to die. The only battle the 33rd has listed is the Battle of Mumfordville, where the Confederates did a number on the Union during that fight. Other than that, legend has it, Mahal is buried in the cemetery and was said to flee the war in fear, falling off a mountain during that time and meeting his end. One of the more well-known last names in this area is Shoals. Some of you locals have heard Shoals Ferry Road, for example. Here we find Peter, who hails from Kentucky and is an 1847 arrival in Oregon. There's actually a Shoals, Oregon, not far from here. Peter is actually a distant relative of Daniel Boone as well. In the early days, Shoals Ferry was the most important crossing on the Tualatin River. The only remaining piece of history in that area is a general store that has been there since apparently like the 1890s. Today their advertisement reads, "Feed your chickens, horses, dogs, cats, birds, llamas, and alpacas, and gas. Just regular 87. And 2-cycle stuff inside, neither hand tools, drills, cargo straps, engine oil, fluids, fuses, spray paint, brushes, steel wool, and frozen burritos." Can't beat that. A revisit from my original video. I mentioned this is perhaps the oldest birth year in this cemetery. It appears I lied, as David Carns is listed as 1783. The cool thing about Dolpha, it's your first time seeing this cemetery, was that his father, Solomon Howard, was a Revolutionary War soldier. So I always enjoy stopping by his headstone. It looks a little different from last time, a little weathered. Our final stop is that of Abraham Landis Sr., who was born in North Carolina. Lived there until the age of 12 and moved to Liberty, Kentucky. There he married his neighbor, Mary Conkright. They would live there until 1838, where Abraham was a wagon fabricator. They would move to Quincy, Illinois, aka the Gem City. Primarily, I'm guessing, gets its name for its location along the Mississippi River, a transportation center for America back then. It was also the site of the famous Great Flood of 1993, among the most costly disasters in U.S. history, hitting $16 billion in repairs. Back to Abraham, his family included wife and 4 sons who decided to travel to Oregon in 1847. Interestingly enough, during their journey to Oregon, Abraham Sr. and Jr. apparently were taking care of a minister along the trail who was sick. Abraham Sr. would die in 1855 at the age of 66, and his son, Abraham Jr., died at the age of 28. Both were suspected to have contracted TB from the sick minister when taking care of him, sadly. Time for the tour. One of the biggest complaints, too, which is valid, is the gates are like always locked every time I drive by. I think I've seen them open like once, and that was because the caretaker was here. So parking is like, do you have a space at the end that you can do? Wow, that one's shifting right off the base. That's crazy. But personally, I've never seen anyone visiting. Like I said, it's one of the older ones in Oregon. Most likely you'll have the whole place to yourself if you visit. Let's have one of the better views in Oregon. Say opens up to the valley. Their Civil War guy who served in the 5th Illinois Cavalry that was apparently highly dysfunctional. A lot of political division there and not the best leadership. It is next to a pretty busy road right now. A lot of construction going on though. That might be why traffic is getting kind of backed up. There's some random cemetery bases in the back of the cemetery, just abandoned. See, there's a few there. I think there was actually just a random headstone leaned against a tree. I'll kind of find that one. It's somewhere back there. There's a interesting last name. Never seen that. Definitely has some of those old school white ones. They look like hanging in there as best as they can. An IOF member. Just realized I had a hole in my pocket. My phone slipped out. Sorry. Guess I need new pants. Now there used to be a fence over there. I remember, and man, was it beat up. It looks like they got rid of it. But all nice and open now. Crazy how the bases are just eroding away, huh? Piper. Holstein, Germany. Ah, there it is. I saw one. OVB. I have to look that up, but sadly just kind of sitting back there by themselves. Traveled back here. This is something of England. Oh boy, can't see it, but you guys will be able to in the video. Relatively new. That is a pretty cool headstone with a cross on it. It's neat. That looks like the finger pointing up. You can barely see it. pretty classic symbol on the old headstones. Sonic symbol with the signature, that's cool. Do like the tree fill to this cemetery. I remember that from last time. Jack. Gone home. The anchor. A little quieter. I think we talked about Catherine in our first visit. Specifically, remember that headstone. And Cox here. I think they had to do something with like a wagon train driver or something along those lines. It's been so long since I've been here. That one out. This is one of the prettier headstones of Carpenter. Looks like it's gonna fall flat on its face one day. That's a pretty cool one. But as you can see, as we're coming to the end of the cemetery, there's a lot of headstones that are just kind of fallen over time. Whether that's due to vandalism or weathering, I'm not really sure. I did see that minor note that it was vandalized in what, 1993 or something along those lines. That's a lot of headstones that get vandalized, huh? That's probably why the gate is locked all the time. I wouldn't blame them on that avenue. Here's that monster, Thomas Sr. Don't think this one's going anywhere. Flowers design, it's neat. Something there. Leave it for you to see. As I said, my eyes suck, but the cameras does not. I also saw this last one I wanted to show you. This is Probably one of the more unique designs I've seen. Take a picture of that. Maybe I'll make that the thumbnail. Anywho, hope you enjoyed the visit, the second visit, actually. If you guys like these second visits, let me know. Shoot me an email or comment below. Hope you're doing all right. Starting to get a little warm out, thank God. Try to get out more for the cemetery exploration as well. Anyways, stay safe. Thanks for watching and have a good one.